And we are live. It's the Revved Up 906 podcast, a Detroit Pistons podcast to be exact. And I'm Hudson.
And I'm Ryan.
And before we get into episode number 27, I want to shout out to Campfire Coworks. They are an office sharing space here in Marquette, Michigan, and that is where our studio is located. So a big thanks to Campfire Coworks because we're happy to be here. We're happy to be bringing you guys higher quality and better content, and looking forward to continuing that partnership in the years to come. Also, Revved Up 906 podcast is growing and we want to continue to grow. So make sure to like and subscribe because we are bringing you all the Detroit Pistons content, all the inside news, and all the statistics because you know your boys stay close to the statistics. So make sure to like and subscribe. We appreciate you guys for watching. And let's get into episode number 27. We have been doing a series since the Detroit Pistons season has ended where we are evaluating each and every player. And this week, we are getting into Marvin Bagley and Isaiah Stewart. And we're doubling up for this week just because there's so many guys we have to cover. We already got into Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Bojan Bogdanovic, Killian Hayes. If you haven't watched those episodes, go watch them because they're very informative. But we're going to start off with Marvin Bagley this week. And we saw him average 12 points, 6.4 rebounds, and 0.7 blocks on 58% from the field, which when doing my research on Marvin Bagley, that's what I was most impressed by was his pretty efficient shooting.
Yeah, he definitely was more efficient this year than he has been in years past. And you could definitely tell right away from just the outlook of this season. But there were a lot of things that he struggled with. And my big, now I'm just jumping into concerns, but my big concern is the amount of games he played this year.
Totally agree.
Because he only played 42 total games.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I broke it down even further. So, how many games has he played each season that he's been in the league?
Okay.
His rookie year, he played 62. His second year, 13. Third year, 43. Fourth year, 48. And then, of course, this season, 42. So he's had 3 years in a row where he's had 40-plus games, but it's still 40-plus games. It's not a full season.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I broke it down to how many games has he missed in each season.
Right.
His rookie year, 20. Second year, 69. Third, 39. Fourth, 34. And this past year, 40. He's missed a total of 202 games in his career.
Yeah.
I just want to throw this out there because we're going to be talking about him later. Isaiah Stewart has played almost just as many games in his career as Marvin Bagley, but he's currently at 189 to Marvin Bagley's 208 total games he's played in.
Mm-hmm.
And the difference between the two of them, Bagley's been in the league longer.
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah. So that's just why it's scary to me is that he's played in such few games.
Yeah.
But I will say this season definitely was a good one for him. He stepped outside of his box. He was much different as a player this year than he has been years past. And you can tell just based off the stats that he has improved.
Yeah, and his offensive ability, he's proven that he can get buckets in today's NBA as a 7-footer. And he was a guy that, he would pull you in with his offensive ability, but then kind of struggle in other categories as far as defense. He used to get eaten alive this last season in the paint. There were so many centers that he would go up against, that Nick Claxton, Daniel Gafford.
Yeah.
There were so many guys that when we would play against them, those aren't even like the biggest names as far as centers in the NBA, and those guys would eat him alive. So it would be frustrating at times. But his season totals, like you said, played 42 games, 990 minutes played, and then 504 points, 269 rebounds, 19 steals, 30 blocks. In 42 games, 502 points isn't bad. So that's kind of proven the fact that, that dude can get buckets.
Yeah, he definitely had his point totals up this year. Going back to even his rookie year stats were pretty solid, but they weren't jump out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like he's living up to expectations. That's kind of been his thing his entire career is he hasn't lived up to expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this year you can see how the value in him in the sense of what he was able to do in just 42 games for you. But for me, it's a question down the line as to if we were to keep him, what is the longevity of him? Because he's missed so many games in his career
Mm-hmm.
that once you get older, you get injured more often.
Right.
And so it's just, he's missed so many games already. He's missed 202 total games.
Yep.
Who's to say he's not going to miss 30 to 40 more games next season?
And what do all playoff teams have in common? They can stay healthy.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, in the Pistons' future, that's why I did like having guys like Sadiq Bey, because he stayed so healthy. He never got hurt. He never missed a game. Guys like Isaiah Stewart dealt with injuries, towards the end of the season. But historically, like you were saying, is always playing. He's always suiting up.
Yeah.
And even Killian, later in his career, in his third season, really was able to not be injury prone. And that's what playoff teams need. And if the Detroit Pistons want to be a contending team one day, we need guys that can stay healthy.
Yeah.
And Marvin Bagley just kind of worries me about that, because he's so in question as far as if he can stay healthy for an 82-game schedule. He hasn't done it yet in 5 seasons. So
and that's not good. And I have often broken down possible comparisons for each of our guys. So, like, obviously, Jaden Ivey, Dwayne Wade, Jalen Duren, Dwight Howard, etc. And this one, the list of comparisons that 538 had for him, I couldn't agree with a single one, because just given that majority of the guys on the list were nothing special, and they were just average NBA players. And I view Bagley, he is not an average NBA player. He has the ceiling to be one of the better bigs in recent years, but just the injury bug is keeping him from reaching that. And so my comparison is a fellow Duke player.
All right.
Was a second overall pick like Bagley.
Yeah.
Jabari Parker.
Yeah.
And the reason, it's not a bad comparison, because they're almost identical players in their play style. And then on top of that, they missed a crap ton of games because of injuries.
Right.
So, like, Jabari Parker's fifth-year averages and stats compared to Marvin Bagley's this year, averaged 14.5 points per game, played 64 games, averaged 26.9 minutes per game, shot 49% from the field, 31% from three, 71% from the free throw line, averaged like 7 boards, 3 assists, 3 turnovers, 3 fouls. It's like almost identical to Bagley.
Right.
And so that's why they fit so much in comparison, just because you look at Jabari Parker initially. He was supposed to be a generational talent. He was supposed to be one of the better power forwards coming out.
He was the man.
Yeah. And Bagley even was talked and hyped up so much, so like Jabari Parker, that we haven't seen anything near what we've been hoping for. And so that's why the two of them are comparisons. Now, some of you might disagree with that, and that's perfectly fine. You can have your own opinion. But when I was breaking this down, the list that they gave, like Kurt Thomas, Jason Thompson, Charlie Villanueva, Kevin Willis, Donald Hodge, Stromile Swift, Channing Frye, William Tisdale, Rick Smits. Like, I just couldn't agree with a lot of them for Marvin Bagley. And so then when I was trying to break it down, like, who off the top of my head could I compare Marvin Bagley to? The first name that popped into my head was Jabari Parker. But it's because they're pretty much identical.
Yeah, I don't hate the Channing Frye one. That's probably the one that I think is most realistic. I mean, Channing Frye, didn't have the most luxurious career, but their play style as far as court presence is kind of similar, because Channing Frye was so offensively focused. He wasn't the best defender. That's kind of like where Marvin Bagley's at. But yeah, Jabari Parker, man, he was a beast. And I do think they have similar play style, because even Jabari Parker early in his career wasn't necessarily a spot-up shooter like Marvin Bagley's kind of developed into. But post up repertoire that Jabari had is a lot like Marvin Bagley. So I like that comparison. But as far as like comparing Marvin Bagley to people, it's kind of tough because you
Yeah.
don't see the, if anything, I'd compare Marvin Bagley to like James Wiseman, but like there's kind of in the same
Yeah.
point in their career, so it's like kind of hard.
That's why it's so hard, is we haven't seen a lot of tape on Bagley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's been 5 years in the league now, but even in the 5 years, only playing 208 games, that is terrible.
Yeah.
Like Jabari Parker, in his 5th year in all total, he played in 247 games,
Mm-hmm.
which is not far off of Bagley. He missed 163 games in 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't that far off of Bagley. So the fact that they've missed almost just as many games, played in just as much games, and their stats and their traits are so similar that, look at Jabari Parker right now. He is out of the league.
Mm-hmm.
And he really only played 8 years in the league. The last 3 years, he played like 13 games a season in each spot. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, that's why it worries me,
Mm-hmm.
because he like fell off a cliff.
Yep.
And that means, based off of the trajectory of Marvin Bagley's career thus far, even though he's shown flashes that he can play, it's more of like, do you give a roster spot to a guy that gets injured so frequently?
Yeah, and we already have these guys with notoriously injury-prone careers. James Wiseman, that's another reason why he's kind of had a slow start.
Yep.
And why we saw him get traded to us. And it does worry you, because if it's obviously next man up, but when Jalen Duren is banging bodies in the paint, you need someone to be able to come off the bench and give that presence. And if you're always injured, who's there to back up Jalen Duren? And then it's just a trickle effect of injuries.
Yeah. And even with Bagley this season, majority of the games he missed was because of a hand injury.
Yeah.
It wasn't even
It's like freak accident.
It wasn't even like anything like super duper important. Now I'm not saying a hand injury isn't important, because there are some where it's like, yeah, that's important. But it's not like an ACL or anything. Like, he realistically, he could have played towards the end of the season, but we saw that they did just rest a lot of the guys for the remaining of the season, because it's like, why not just tank a little bit and try and get a number 1 pick? And so you can see that and understand that, but at the same time, it's like, it's just a hand injury. It's not like anything crucial, but it's just, to me, that's the biggest thing, is that I'm concerned for his future, given the fact of how frequently he gets injured.
We talked about the concerns. We talked about the skill set that he has developed through his career since his rookie year in 2018. I want to talk about his best game of the season, because I always love in this series dissecting what each player's best game was, because it kind of shows what they're capable of against solid, well-rounded teams. James Wiseman had his best game of the season, March 21st, in my opinion, his best game of the season, March 21st versus the Atlanta Hawks. His stat line was 31 points, 2 blocks, 3 steals, 8 rebounds, and 12 of 19 shooting, showing once again his high percentage shots. I want to note that the Pistons did lose 107-129 to the Atlanta Hawks, but something I want to highlight and focus in on is who Marvin Bagley was playing against when facing the Atlanta Hawks. And why that stat line is so impressive to me is because he's going against Clint Capella, John Collins, and Onyeka Okongwu. He's playing against these big centers that are known for shot blocking. All 3 of them are known for their shot blocking ability. And Marvin Bagley, to be able to put up 31 points, 8 rebounds, 3 steals, 2 blocks, that's an impressive stat line against that team, because I mean, when you go up against a team with 3 centers like that, I mean, we always struggle against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's because of their skilled bigs. So I was really impressed by that, to see that, okay, when Marvin Bagley's at his best, this guy is top tier.
Yeah. When he's healthy, man, he is a freak of an athlete.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not anything compared to a Jalen Duren, a Jaden Ivey, or James Wiseman, but he can play, and there's a reason why he was taken as high as he was. There's a reason why Duke, even Coach K, recruited him.
Yep.
It's because he's legit. And if you can stay healthy for a majority of a season and see what we've witnessed this past year with him, yeah, he didn't play a crap ton of games, but when you have games like that, it's more of like, okay, I'm fine if he sits on a roster a little bit longer because let's give him a chance. Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's just injury after injury after injury, it's like, why is he even on a roster?
Yeah, that's why I like to highlight those things because, yeah, as people that, as we follow so closely the Detroit Pistons, we're always evaluating who should stay on the roster, who should, and, like we mentioned before, we're not sure if Marvin Bagley should stay on, but then you look at a game like this and you're like, I want to hold on to that Marvin Bagley. You know what I mean? I want to hold on to him and keep him on a roster because who knows how many times he might do that next season. Maybe he does it 10 times next season. It's very interesting, and that's why Troy Weaver has the hardest job in the world.
Yeah.
And that's why the future coach of the Detroit Pistons has the hardest job in the world, because when you have a young team the way the Pistons do, there's going to be guys that are a little streaky like Marvin Bagley that are going to be like, ooh, he looks so lazy. Oh, he had 3 threes in a row. It's so difficult because it's like a back and forth decision of, okay, how long do I go on of keeping him on our roster? And he looks so good, has shines of a superstar, but then is sometimes dead weight at the end of the bench. Well, we talked about the statistics. We have another guy we have to cover in this episode. So that leads us to giving Marvin Bagley his final grade of this last season. Ryan, why don't you give us the rules for how we grade each player?
So the grading tree.
Yeah.
A, amazing season, better than expected. B, great season, better than advertised. C, as advertised with room for improvement. D, below advertised with a lot of room for improvement. And F, our favorite, who is this guy?
Yeah, which we haven't given anybody an F yet, so that's pretty good.
He might be the first. I'm kidding.
We'll see. No, so I'll get into my first grade. Marvin Bagley is a guy that I've been high on since he was at Duke, even in high school at Sierra Canyon. I was always a big fan of him. So I hold him to a high regard because of his history of being a very well-known player, taken the second overall pick. So I hold him very highly. He showcased that he can get a bucket when you need him to, and I like that. But like we were saying, the injuries and not really showing even in his 5th season that he can play a whole 82-game schedule is very nerve-wracking to me. I think he has a lot of room for improvement next season. That's why I'm going to give him a C+, because I'm happy with it, but also you need to show me a little bit more than what you did this year. And if you can do that next season when we evaluate him, I'll be giving him an A.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, except I can't give him a C+. And that's just because of the injuries.
Yeah.
Because
so you're going to go lower than I do?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the first time in history, folks. You're watching history. I love it.
There you go.
All right, let's get
I'm going to give him a C.
Okay.
And that's just because I would agree, based off our grading tree, it was an advertised season with room for improvement. That's what it was.
Yep.
We weren't expecting anything spectacular out of Marvin Bagley this season. Let's be realistic here. And he gave us what we expected from him. He didn't give us a ton of really any tape. I mean, he played 42 games, which is not great. He missed out on 40 games this season. That's a lot.
Yep.
And so just because of the injuries and just how many games he's played in his career versus how many he's missed just as many games pretty much as he's played in his career, which that's scary.
No.
And just the trajectory in comparison of a Jabari Parker getting thrown into the mix. Now, I'm not saying he's Jabari Parker, but just the similarities are there. And so that's why it scares me. And if he doesn't improve on not getting injured as much next year, man, that would be an A+ season for me.
Right, exactly.
Because if he can get rid of the injuries, he's fine. He can come off the bench, be a good role player on our team going forward. I'm fine with that. But it's more of like, I'm fine having good role players if they're healthy.
Right.
And if he can't stay healthy, then Weaver ship him out. And that's putting it in the nicest way possible, because Bagley, I do love you. You're a solid guy. You're a great person. But if you can't stay healthy, it's just concerning to me.
Totally.
And so that's why I have to give you a C.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Marvin Bagley and his season evaluation, his final grade, I gave him a C+. Ryan gave him a C. If you guys agree with that, make sure to comment below. We are going to start talking about Isaiah Stewart and his third season with the Detroit Pistons. This season, Isaiah averaged 11.3 points per game, 8.1 rebounds, and 1.4 assists on 56% from the field. You know, it's interesting because I am a guy that was a big Isaiah Stewart fan his rookie year. Second season, still an Isaiah guy. But throughout this season, I became very tough on Isaiah. So I'm excited to get into this topic. As far as starting to talk about and evaluating his season, where did you go with this, Ryan?
So just like any guy, like we've said before earlier in this episode, I've kept them to the same grading scale that I have in every single episode. I just throw out season averages, season totals, notable comparisons, just different traits that I see them going down and going for down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like Isaiah Stewart, the notable comparisons that 538 had were all over the place, but they were all solid players. And it, like, one, I can see traits from every one of the guys,
Right.
but I don't see an exact replica of Isaiah Stewart,
Right.
because the first two seasons for Stu, we saw a completely different player than we've seen this season.
Mm-hmm.
Because the first two seasons we saw just a big who likes getting boards, who likes dunking, who is a shot blocker, who's all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
This year they really focused on developing his three-point shot and making him into a stretch four.
Right.
And I don't hate that, because we need a stretch four. We don't really have one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really appreciated that. So their top 10 notable comparisons. Number 1, Wendell Carter Jr.
Interesting. Okay.
Number 2, Bam Adebayo.
Yeah, that's a good
Number 3, John Collins. Number 4, Jared Sullinger. Number 5, Serge Ibaka. Number 6, Daryl Dawkins. Number 7, Kevin Love. 8, Derek Favors. 9, Brooke Lopez. And 10, Jared Allen.
Interesting. I like the Jared Sullinger one. I was always a
Mhm.
big Jared Sullinger
Yeah.
fan for some reason. I liked his colored mohawks when he's on the
Mhm.
Celtics. But yeah, it's a, you know, and I see a lot of Bam Adebayo in him, just because of, you know, Bam didn't necessarily master the 3-point shot,
Yep.
but he has it in his game, and I
Mhm.
think that's kind of where Stu's going to be, where he's not going to get to the level of 3-point shooting as a Kevin Love,
Yeah.
but he's going to have that in his back pocket where he
Mhm.
can hurt you. He's just not going to give you 6 threes a night. But as far as like his passing ability, it's not quite where Bam is. You know, Bam's a very good passer
Yeah.
for a center. But I think if he developed that passing ability, it makes him that much more dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think we saw his passing ability shine a little bit more in his third season, with the game kind of slowing down and him kind of having some offensive threats like Bojan and Bagley to kind of pass the ball around and show some
Yeah.
love.
See, for me, I see Isaiah Stewart as kind of like the ripoff Bam Adebayo,
Mm-hmm.
because they are similar in builds.
Mm-hmm.
They have around the same length. They're about just as fast as one another. They pretty much do the same thing. But Bam, the difference between the two is Bam's more developed. Bam
Right.
is by far one of the best centers in the game today, and Isaiah Stewart is nowhere near that.
Right.
Right now, in comparison between the two, Isaiah Stewart would be a good average NBA player compared to Bam,
Right.
who is an all-star. And that's why this list is so, I guess you could say, flavorful,
Mm-hmm.
because there's not one guy on this list where I'm like, oh, that's a good comparison.
Right.
They all have traits that Stu has, but he was taken in the draft as a guy who needs to develop, and he's been developing this entire time. But now we kind of need a coach to come in and really elevate his game, and Casey started that trend. about adding a 3-point shot. John Beilein was sitting in the shadows developing his game, and you can really see the difference between this season and years past. But there's not one player on this list other than mine would be Derek Favors.
Mm-hmm.
I see that one because they kind of have the same play style. They're around the same size as one another. It's just Derek Favors has had he initially came into the league as going like, oh, you got to watch out for Derek Favors.
Right.
And now he's a vet where it's like, yeah, it's Derek Favors. That's about it.
Mm-hmm.
Which that's kind of how I view Stu right now. Stu is one of those guys where it's like, gotta watch out for him, but it's not like he's a huge weapon and he's gonna hammer you in the paint or anything. You gotta watch out for Jalen Duren though,
right?
And James Wiseman, but you don't have to worry about Isaiah Stewart. That's how I viewed him this season.
Yeah,
is that it wasn't anything spectacular. It was as expected, but there's just the season was weird because my notes for him is drastically smaller than what it is for Bagley,
right?
We just talked about. And that's because Isaiah did play more games, but this season it was just more all over the place. And it wasn't like, wow, Isaiah Stewart, you blew me away. It was more of like, oh, Isaiah Stewart, yay.
There was a lot of games when we were recapping where we would look at the box score and Isaiah Stewart would have 8 points, 5 rebounds. And you're like, for a starting center, like,
yeah,
that's all you're giving us? Like, you're getting starter minutes. You got to produce. I want to talk about his season totals and kind of hone in on a certain season total. He played 50 games with a total of 1,414 minutes played, 567 points. So not many more points than Marvin Bagley. 403 rebounds, 20 steals, and 34 blocks. I want to talk about the 34 blocks in 50 games because we saw Marvin Bagley play 42, but had 30 blocks. Okay, well, that's very similar.
Yeah.
And we always talk about Stu as being a defensive anchor. Early in his career, we really thought he was going to be that. But there was trends this season where we're like, our centers are getting eaten alive in the paint. There would be games where there was 60 points in the paint, and we're like, that's why we lost, because we couldn't stop anybody in the paint. He averaged per game over his 50 games was 0.7 blocks. That's not even in the top 50 in the NBA in block averages. Notable players higher than Isaiah in that ranking is rookie Jalen Duren, and a guy that ranked higher was Kyrie Irving, a point guard that's not even known for defense. So it was kind of frustrating breaking down that statistic and seeing only 34 over 50 games, because what we needed and what we drafted him to be was a solid defender in the paint and get us buckets in the paint. He's just a paint guy, eat the paint alive. And he's proving that, you know, he's kind of getting away from that and getting becoming more of a 3-point shooter.
Yeah, but I don't mind him becoming more of a 3-point shooter because that makes him even more of a weapon. But just it's so hard for me to talk about him this season because there's not much to talk about.
Yeah.
Like, you look at the first 2 years and it's like, oh, okay. And especially his rookie year, you're like, okay, did Weaver just get a steal? But after this season, you're like
mid.
Yeah, it's like he really fell off. And it's not because he's adding a 3-point game that he fell off, because a 3-point game is going to make him so much better than he already is. But it's just the fact that he just was,
Yeah.
And
comment below if you agree. I kind of want to hear what the community also thinks, because I want to know. So if you think Isaiah Stewart was mid, comment below. We want to see.
Because I really think he was. It wasn't it wasn't anything off the charts. When you have Kyrie Irving, of all people,
I know,
like Kyrie Irving.
I knew that would fire you up. He's not a Kyrie Irving guy. I knew that would fire you up, and it's true. But I wanted to add it because I was like, oh, I know Ryan will get a little fired up with that.
Yeah, because
it's disappointing. It's what?
Like, how is Kyrie Irving having a higher average than you in blocks?
Yeah, he had 0.9. Yeah.
That's sad.
I know. It is sad.
That might make your grade for me a little bit lower.
Yeah. Well, even Kyrie didn't play the whole season.
No,
he had all kinds of drama going on, so it's like...
I mean, Kyrie was the reason why the Mavericks didn't even make the playoffs.
Yeah. I know.
It's true. It's not me being over opinionated right now. It is true.
No, I agree.
They were a playoff caliber team without him, and then he showed up, and then they fell apart. Just saying.
I love it. No, I knew that would fire you up. That's why I was like, when I found it, I'm like, I just struck gold. I struck gold. But, so with Isaiah, it's mixed emotions because, yes, I can be ultra tough on Pistons players because I expect so much from them just because they're my guys.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want them to succeed. But with Isaiah, it's also, I think I'm being pretty fair when I say that he was just kind of mid. He didn't really surprise me with much play. Let's talk about his best game of the season. It was actually in October 30th, so early in the season, very early.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. It was about 7 games into the season, so very early. And it was against the Golden State Warriors. Isaiah put up only 24 points, but he had 13 rebounds, 6 of 10 shooting from the field, and that was really the most. So even like his best game of the season wasn't like impressive, like at least with Bagley, shot a super high percentage, a couple blocks, a couple steals,
did a little bit of
30
everything.
points, 30 burger. But so we did win that game against the Golden State Warriors. We won 128-114. But even that, his best game of the season, he's 22, 23 years old. He should be hitting his prime soon, heading into his 4th, 5th season. And to be I want to see him do that kind of a game. I want him to average that.
Yeah.
And the fact that that's his best game is a little disappointing.
I will say, going into the season, I'm like, there's no way he gets moved in the off season, or there's no way he gets moved in the future because he's a steal and he has a very high ceiling given what he did his rookie year. And even his second year wasn't terrible off of his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
It was more of like, oh, okay, I see you. But now it's like he's in his own shadow.
Yeah.
And it's just a shell of a player now. And so that's why, I mean, you look back, Weaver made the comment, if he sees a move, he's going to make it.
Yeah.
And so just the fact that Stu has a high ceiling still and just really wasn't that great this year. You could have his flyer hanging out there on a tree or something, and I'm sure somebody is going to take a piece of the slip and go like, okay, Weaver, let's see what we can give you. Because I do, as of now, I see Stu getting moved. And that's sad because I love Stu.
Yeah, I do
like,
too.
who doesn't love Beef Stew?
Yeah, Beef Stew, man.
Beef Stew is such a great nickname, too.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great nickname.
And he's blue collar, which makes it even better. Because it's like, we love blue collar people.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he just fits our city and he fits our team in terms of personality, he's not afraid to go after the king.
Yep. Even when we went to the not the Palace, Little Caesars Arena in Detroit for our weekend there, we're watching warm-ups, getting video for Instagram and stuff like that, and then Isaiah Stewart walks out with a cut-off warm-up shirt, and he just looks jacked. You're like, that's Detroit. Isaiah Stewart is Detroit. You want it to work out.
Yeah.
But you can't have all the flair and no game.
Yep.
You got to show up on the court, because if you really want to be held as a high regard in the Pistons organization, you got to show up.
Yeah.
And in his 3rd season, he showed up to play for 50 games, but none of it was too flashy.
And honestly, it's kind of like I am taking a shot right now, but it's kind of like Dylan Brooks.
Yeah,
he called out the king. What happened?
Yep.
Well, you're not re-signing with the Grizzlies.
So yeah. And then a year, not even a year after Isaiah Stewart's fight with LeBron, he's kind of on the downfall.
Yeah. So the theory is, do not mess with the king,
because
something bad is going to happen to your career.
Yep. Do you have any last final things you want to talk about before we give Stu his final grade?
Dylan Brooks is not coming to the Pistons.
Clip it. Right. Yeah. Me and Ryan are on the same page. If you guys want Dylan Brooks, comment down below. But
if you want a future episode talking about Dylan Brooks, I will bash him the entire time.
Comment below if you want a video. We'll give it to you if you want it. We'll give it to you. Let's get into the final grades for Isaiah Stewart. We didn't see any major improvements from Isaiah. We did see a little bit of a increase of his three-point shooting. But in the absence of Cade, we really needed him to step up, and he just wasn't really there. I hope when we are evaluating him again, possibly next season, I can give him a better grade. I want to see improvement. But what I saw this season from Stu, I just wasn't impressed. I'm going to give him a C-.
Okay.
Okay, now I'm so, you might match me, but I'm excited to see what you say because you were tougher on Bagley than I expected. So I'm excited.
That's true.
I'm excited to see what you get.
I don't see, he was not below advertised, because he did have his good game in October, which was a long time ago. But there were other flashes at some points and during games where you're like, okay, Isaiah Stewart, good job.
Yep.
I'm happy for you. And again, it's like, it's one of those fairy tale things that you want to work. It's like, oh, he just fits our city so well. I love him. He's just a great person overall. And that's why you really do want it to work. But then there's times this season where it's like, oh my goodness, what is going on? Who is this guy? Which would be an F. But he is not an F.
That's true.
He's not.
Okay.
He's not. But he's not a D, not an F. I wouldn't say even a C-.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so
he's a C.
All right, you hear it here first.
Because he really was as advertised. He didn't have a mediocre season. He didn't have a poor season. He just had a expected season. And he didn't do anything spectacular. He didn't blow the socks off your feet. He didn't do a lot of great things. But when it did matter most, you saw development out of him. You saw a guy who typically, in recent years, the last 2 years, has sucked from beyond the arc, but has finally made a push in being a better three-point shooter. And that's crucial in today's day and age, having a big who can shoot.
Yep.
Pretty much any big on any roster can shoot a three now. And so just the fact that Stu was missing that for 2 years, that really put a damper on him and what he could do. So this year, the fact that he added a three-point shot, that makes him an even better player. Even if his stats aren't spectacular and he only plays in 50 games, you can still put your hat on the fact that he did develop a three-point shot, and so that's why I gave him a C.
Yeah, and that might make him even more valuable to other teams.
Yeah, which is sad.
I'm always known for being tough on Stu. I've always been tough on him, so I'm not surprised I gave him a C-. It's just, he was as advertised.
Yeah.
But nothing more.
And the crazy thing is, like, Bagley did, in my opinion, Bagley outplayed him this year. But we're still giving Stu a C, C- range.
Right. So that's being nice, kind of. Yeah. That will do it for episode number 27. We broke down Marvin Bagley and Isaiah Stewart's season evaluation after the Detroit Pistons 17-game win season. Make sure to go follow Grind Clothing Co. on Instagram because we have partnered up with them to have our very own merch. You can find a link to our merch in our YouTube bio and in the description of this YouTube video. So make sure to go show them some love and go buy some merch and rep your Revved Up 906 boys while you're at the library, while you're getting groceries, while you're lifting. Make sure to rep your favorite Detroit Pistons podcast. We will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.